Today, I'm going to review the Lenovo Yoga 910. And as you can already see, this is another convertible laptop. And actually, after using this for a few hours with this really great 360-degree hinge, I started to ask myself, why this is still not a standard? Why do we still have the old school dinosaur laptop hinge that in my opinion should get extinct? Yes, I get it mostly makes sense on a touchscreen laptop, but even without, I think the overall experience would just be way more versatile and way more enjoyable. And that's why I want to definitely take a closer look at this one here today. Starting off with the design and build quality. I definitely think it looks really sleek, also quite thin with about 1.4 kilograms, also not that heavy and not quite as big for a 14-incher as you would expect. We also have this really nice aluminum trim here. One thing that I want to point out is that it is powder coated on the top and on the bottom, which feels a little bit weird, especially on the bottom. It feels a little bit like a potato, but I want to just mention that this could at some point chip off. Like you can also see here, there is a little bit of a scuff, and then you will see the blank aluminum. So maybe not the most sturdy solution after all, because the whole device itself is super sturdy because it doesn't bend or so. It feels very solid and no flexing at all. So really great job in terms of build quality. We don't have rubber feet. This is more like hard plastic and doesn't really protect it all that well from sliding. And you can see here the fan ventilation, and that allows you to use it on your lap without getting any heat issues. In terms of ports, we have here the USB Type-C for the charging, and only this one is for charging. This one is 3.1, and you could use this, for example, for the display port or something. As you can also see, we have a cutout, and it makes opening it quite easy. I will show this off a little bit later. Then we have the power button, headphone jack, and another USB 3.0. No SD card reader and no volume rocker, which is a little bit sad to see. But still, I have to say, build and design definitely quite nice. And as you can see here, the hinge is really great because you can usually, if it wouldn't slide off, you could open it, and the hinge allows one-hand opening. Like I said, it just slides a little bit on the desk. Now, if you take a look at the inside, aluminum here as well, and it feels a little bit nicer here, not so much powder coated as it was out on the outside. The keyboard itself, I have to say, is actually done quite good. We have two levels of backlight, which can be enabled with the FN and spacebar. The cursor buttons look nice. We have easy access to volume controls, brightness, and so on, so all is good here. The actual layout is working quite nice. As you can see, I have the quartz layout, and we don't have maybe a ton of travel, but I actually think that it bottoms out quite soft and is also quite quiet, as you can hear. So I have to say, I actually did not expect the typing experience to be that good. So actually quite nice job done. It's not on a ThinkPad level, of course, but I have no complaints here at all. This is actually quite good. Now, the trackpad I will only call good, and the only reason why I won't call it very good is that I think the surface is a little bit too slippery, and that's why it takes a little bit off the precision, because otherwise it's fine. It reacts to all the gestures fine. It's also quite big enough. Doesn't have a gap beneath, and it clicks quite nice, so actually quite good. And the same goes for the fingerprint reader, because that one is reliable and usually quite fast. No complaints here at all. So let's get into the display already, and I will zoom in just a little bit so you can see things a little bit better. First of all, I want to get into one thing, that is the brightness. Because as you can see here, actually the hinge is very good, but I've noticed one thing. If you use it like this in normal laptop mode, you can touch and it almost doesn't wobble. Which is really great, especially in the laptop mode, but there is a certain angle, like for example here, where it will fall down. So just keep that in mind, but this is usually an angle that you should not actually use. Now, in terms of brightness, I will go all the way up to 100%, even though this display is actually quite good, and I will give you a few values a little bit later on. But what I want to show you here right now is the calibration, because as you can see here, this is without it being calibrated with Spider 5, and this is with the calibration. So colors just get a little bit deeper, a little bit more contrasty, a little bit nicer to look at. But I have to say, and that's why I want to go into the actual subjective things a little bit later, just to cover the numbers here. 96% of sRGB, 74% of Adobe RGB. We have a quite okay gamma. It's a little bit less, and that's why the contrast feels a little bit weaker than I've noticed on some other devices, but it is still totally fine. As you can also see, black levels are good. Brightness was at around 330 lux with my measurement on my lux meter. Contrast was still fine, and especially the white point was actually really good already from the start, as you can see here once again. So these things are good. The contrast could maybe be a little bit better, and I want to go into my subjective thinking now. 1080p display on a 14-inch works quite good, I would say, but where I noticed a little bit of a more grainy feel was, especially if I used Google Docs and I was a little bit closer typing, I noticed that the font is a little bit grainy. But in normal use, the 14-inch 1080p display was still sharp enough, no problems here at all, and it is good. Like I said, the white level was good. Black levels are fine, no problems here at all. I noticed a little bit of light bleed here at the bottom, like 2 spots, but this is pretty much the only thing. Colors, I have to say, are actually really pleasant, especially after you have calibrated it, but even without, it was really pleasant because quite vibrant colors. Since we have a glossy display, of course, this will be a little bit of a problem in sunlight. Even though the display is kind of bright enough, you will get trouble after all. So this is what I want to talk about in terms of display. So let's talk about the sound now, and let me get to the desktop and start a song. I guess one thing was quite obvious. If you had it with the speakers firing upwards, or maybe if you had them on your lap, it will sound a little bit more muffled and just not as loud. But if you have the chance to have it on your desk and it will refract, the sound is actually quite good, because then the maximum volume was really good and the sound was also quite nice with a good amount of bass, mids and highs. It's only, as I said, in laptop mode, if you actually have it on your lap or on a softer surface. I am not the biggest fan of the bottom firing speakers because they usually get muffled and not so loud. What is really great though is the headphone jack. Super loud and really great. I just want to quickly point out that we have the Dolby Audio software, and I had to kind of bump up the highs quite a lot, but this is just a quick thing that I did for the headphone jack. You won't really need this on the normal speakers, but the headphone jack is really loud and actually quite good quality, so I'm happy to see that. Now, let's talk about performance, and let me actually get in this mode once again. And as you have maybe already seen, the values for the SSD, and this is absolutely great. 1700 read and about 600 writes with the 256 gigabyte SSD. And the boot up time is actually the highlight here. 5 to 6 seconds. This is the fastest I've seen when it comes to the boot up time. Now, in terms of performance, what I've noticed is that the scrolling in the browser is maybe not the very best one, because I've just noticed a little bit more smaller stutters here and there. And just for example, comparing it with the Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 that I had with just a Y CPU, it felt a little bit better. So I think a little bit optimization would still be left here. If you use it with a mouse or with the trackpad, it's not so noticeable, and it's still okay with the touchscreen, but there it's noticeable that I think it could be optimized a little bit better. And I actually want to just point out one thing when it comes to the performance. And I've said this already so many times, and I will just repeat myself. If you do all your casual daily tasks, like for example, browsing the web, doing some number crunching, and all those typical kind of stuff like video viewing, this CPU is totally enough. You don't really need anything more. If you want to do some gaming, which I wouldn't really recommend here, or some video editing, it is possible, but on a really not that great level. And then a quad-core with a graphics card is just better. But I guess for what it is supposed to be, it does the job just fine. And that's why I would like to go into the noise and heat, and I want to actually start off quite quickly with a demo of the sound. Okay, you've heard the fans, and here is what I have to say about them. Usually they don't turn off that often, just maybe at the start a little bit more often. Once it settles in, it's actually quite okay, and you will only in this idle use, or let's say lighter use, hear fan level 1, which is a little bit whiny, I get that, and especially level 2 was way more whiny, but the noise levels at all points, in my opinion, were acceptable. So it's not the best one. It could have been a more high quality fan that they've used, but I can get past that after all. And especially one thing that I want to get into is the heat. Because on the bottom on idle, it was at about 28 to 29 degrees with 30 in the center. And on the keyboard part, nothing has changed. Under load, pretty much the same, just a little bit higher. 30 on the sides and 36 in the center. Pretty much the same also goes for the keyboard part. What I have to point out though, I could not read out the CPU values for some reason, because all the apps that I've tried set me 30 degrees CPU fixed at all times. So I can't really quite say how warm the CPU got, but I don't think it did throttle at any point because CPU clocks stayed intact. So I guess all is good here. Now when it comes to the software, nothing to really complain here. All is good. You get the typical Lenovo apps. One thing that I want to point out though when it comes to software is a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue that I had because I could not really connect properly to a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi network because it did connect, but the connection was kind of dead. I could not transfer anything, had no internet. And sometimes this actually happened on the 2.4 gigahertz as well. Maybe a faulty driver, maybe I could have fixed it. So I just want to point out, I don't think this is a general issue. Now, when it comes to the battery life, this is absolutely amazing because a full charge takes 2.5 hours, which is absolutely fine, but it's the battery life that was absolutely blowing me away because my first two, a little bit more heavy cycles were at 8 hours, which I already found great, but after that it actually settled to 10 hours of average use, and this was me with a brightness of about 60 to 70%. So some people could use it maybe with 50, maybe some different tasks and so on, and I expect many people, since I know I get usually a little bit less than everyone else, would actually expect like at least 11 to 12 hours on average, which is pretty much the best battery life that I've had on a device like this, and this is highly respectable. And highly respectable are also the pros and cons, because as you can see, we have a lot of pros, not that many and not that many crucial cons, and that's why I want to quickly get through all of those. We have a good port selection, good only because there is no micro SD card slot, no volume rocker maybe, and no micro or some sort of HDMI, but at least we have a Type A, which is nice to see. We have a high quality build. Yes, it could chip off here the powder coating at some point, so be a little bit aware of that, but it feels high quality build. We also have a sleek and versatile design with the 360-degree yoga hinge, and in my opinion, pretty much the best hinge ever. Because even though you have seen it fell off at some certain angle down, I have to say in normal laptop mode or in tablet mode, the hinge was so stiff that if you touch it, it didn't move at all, and if actually the keyboard part did lift. And this brings me to the keyboard. We have a quite good one. I can't really say very good, even though I could type on it way better than I expected with a nice treble night feedback and so on, but there are just the business laptops that have a better one that I have to leave a little bit room for that. The trackpad, like I said, the only reason why it's not very good is just because it's a little bit too slippery for me. The display is good plus. Why good plus and not very good? I could not quite give very good because there are higher resolution displays, a little bit more accurate displays, better contrast and so on. The minor light bit was not an issue though, but it still is a good plus. It was satisfying and no real major complaints. The speakers, especially if you have them on the desk, fully satisfying, then they can reflect on the lap. Even though they are muffled, they are still loud enough and actually sound quite okay, so that is no problem. Headphone jack was really pleasing me because it was very loud, quite high quality. The preset was wrong though. You have to quite noticeably bump up the highs and mids to get a more natural sound experience. Then we have an ultra fast boot up time with about 5 to 6 seconds. This is just amazing. Same goes actually also for the daily use performance because it was totally fine. Only the touchscreen use felt a little bit more sluggish, especially in Chrome. In all other apps, not though. So I have to say it's very good for all casual tasks. If you want some high-end work getting done, then you need a quad core anyway, so it's fine. About the noise, acceptable, maximum fan noise, just a little bit whiny, but otherwise I wouldn't complain. Pretty much no coil band, which is great. And the fantastic battery life for me with about 10 hours on average. This is just great to see. And we have a fingerprint reader. Now, let's get into what is maybe not that great. Okay. Big bottom bezel. As you have maybe seen that the bottom bezel was a little bit big, but I don't really mind that so much because if you quickly take a look at it, yes, this one here is quite big, but therefore we pretty much don't have any here, like on an Infinity Edge display. And in my opinion, that's totally fine because therefore we also have the bigger battery because they made good use of that bigger device. It's just 1080p. I just have that in brackets because it doesn't really bother me too much because it was still a fully satisfying display after all. But there are better ones and it's not the highest resolution anymore these days, so it's okay. Bottom firing speakers, not the best solution. I prefer side firing or even top firing, but it is what it is, and it was a good speaker after all. Performance could be slightly improved, I guess, especially in Chrome. I've seen devices with a similar CPU and so on that were a little bit more smooth, but it's fine. Whiny fan noise, this is just something that you have to decide on your own. If you are very sensitive to whiny noises, you will get maybe a little bit annoyed, especially if you use heavy load a long time and a lot. But if you use it mostly in casual use in idle light tasks, the fans don't turn on often and not for long, and then the little bit whiny noise is not that huge of an issue, but still has to be pointed out. Wi-Fi issues, I've talked about those, a little bit weird, but I guess this is just a driver problem, and no SD card reader. That's pretty much all I have to say, so let's get into the conclusion part. For a price of around, I think, 1,500, if I'm not wrong, this is in Europe actually still a good price. I can't say so much about the US price. I didn't really find this configuration here, so I guess it should be even a little bit cheaper. But I have to say it's a high quality device with, as you have maybe seen, mostly just good to a little bit over good qualities. But I still think it makes a great job, because especially the really great hinge, the speaker, the performance, the amazing battery life is what actually made this for me, because I can use this in a versatile way, absolutely enjoyable at all times, and the battery lasts just so much longer. Okay, I guess more Kaby Lake devices these days will have this kind of battery life, but after all, this is a 14-inch device with a big battery, so I don't think any will get this good. And that's definitely something for someone who uses this device a lot outside where it just can't charge up. So it's definitely great. Price-wise, you just have to see on your own if you can get it for a good price. 1,500 I feel still is a little bit too much, but I think these kind of ultra portables, touchscreen, laptop convertible devices are a little bit on the higher side in general anyway, so this is not an exception. So this would have been it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel and leave me all the comments down there below. Until next time, bye.